Welcome to Reconsider. I'm Bill Hartman. This is the podcast to challenge you to ask better questions, to look beyond traditional models of thinking and arrive at better health and fitness solutions.
You made a post on the UHP network about programming and exercise selection. So that was like one of the subcategories of the 101 Model 101 course, is like the programming section, exercise. And over the last 8 weeks or so, we've put up a blog post for each one of these sort of sections. And these are like in the table of contents of what is the model. This is one of like the 8 categories and sections that are in the course that was created on the network site. So if you want to talk a little bit about what you wrote, I think talking about just exercise selection and programming will be a good topic for today's episode.
Okay.
You wrote it, man. So
well, it's the 10,000.
You remember what you wrote?
Vaguely. No, it's the 10,000 figure. It's like, what are the things that you need to determine the appropriate exercise selection? And we're speaking from a general perspective. And so the whole thing has to start with a representative model. Like, there has to be a way for you to determine how stuff works, what would happen in each one of those categories. Like, that's how you pick an exercise. Now, everybody has a model in their head, whether they think so or not. They do. Like, they have a reason. It's like, so your reason could be as simplistic. And I picked on the bench press in the article because it's kind of easy, but it could be it's chest day and bench press is a chest exercise. That is a representative model, whether you think it is or not. Now, the extent to which you understand how that exercise would influence an outcome, that determines the depth of your understanding and then the quality of your model, right? So you could be a 17-year-old bodybuilder. You walk into the gym, your model is it's Monday. That means it's chest day. And then that means it's time to bench press. And this is for my chest, to make my chest bigger, or whatever it may be, right? And then
Monday, Wednesday, Friday, sometimes Sunday.
Yeah. Well, it's either chest or arm day.
Or just bench day.
Just bench day. Well, that's why when you go into the gym and there's like six bench presses and one squat rack.
I'm trying to think of like, I saw a gym once that had like 30 bench press stations, like 5 declines. Specific, the real great gyms are the ones that have like a bunch of decline benches, they're all fixed too, like the fixed incline bench, the fixed decline bench.
Yeah,
love that.
But the point is there more that we can understand, and does that make everything more useful? Again, so if that's the limitation of a model, then so be it. And it can work for you within the realm that so again, if you're a bodybuilder, it's like all you need to know is that, okay, there's a lot of musculation associated with the bench press. I'm going to do this. But we know that there are consequences to that. And so again, that's another segment of this article, that you need to know where you are, what your capabilities are, and then we need to understand what the consequences are of your actions. And so if you are already in a situation where there are limitations in your movement capacity and you apply a stimulus with an intention based on whatever representation you have in your hand, there are still consequences, and you may not know what those are. And so that might be a bad choice based on some other parameter of health, versus the performance side or the aesthetic, if you will. Again, from the bodybuilding perspective of just building a muscle, making it bigger, making it stronger, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so let's. So I'm going to sort of paraphrase the article, the blog that you posted, which again is Bill posts blog post every 2 on the UHP network. So if you're not a member there, check the description to sign up. It's uhpnetwork.mn.co. There's a blog post every week on Tuesdays. There's office hours from Bill. There's whole lots of content, videos, and posts that get thrown up there. It's a great place where people have come to interact and sort of learn the model together directly from Bill. But some of the key points from the article were, I'll paraphrase the topics and then we'll kind of break them down a little bit. So there's understanding the starting conditions, which you've kind of talked about a little bit. There's the recognition of strategies that each individual is displaying their own, n equals 1 situation. The awareness of secondary, specifically the negative ones. Iterative process, based on observation, adjustment, and refinement. Like, what are your iterations? And then the investment of experience into this whole thing, like repetition and practice, and not expecting to sort of understand this framework and model and then immediately be able to apply it to the best of, like, to a level of someone that's been using it for 10 years, for instance. It's like there's no like, this equals this scenario. With that. So let's start with.
Let's see, but that let me jump on that for a second. That's just like everything else. Like nobody is an expert at anything when they first begin, but that doesn't mean you're not already better than what you were. And so that's the thing that people need to understand. Is like they think they're gonna and based on the questions that we get, it's like people think that they can learn everything all at once, and it's like, no, you got to understand that you're now in process. This is the thing that we're gonna build and construct this over time. And I always use the plumbers as an example. Like the apprenticeship of a plumber is 5 to 7 years, depending on where you're learning to become a plumber, right? So they are an apprentice for 5 to 7 years. Plumbing is not a complex situation. It's very complicated, but it's not a complex situation. So in other words, plumbing doesn't fix itself. It only goes in one direction. Like it can only go poorly, right? There's no replacement parts that it creates on its own, like a human being creates its own replacement parts. You eat food, you get more energy. You eat food, you build more muscle, or whatever it may be. It's like plumbing doesn't work that way. And they spend 5 to 7 years learning how to become a plumber. And then you take one of the most complex things that has ever existed, which is us humans being weird. And people think that there's got to be a hack or a tip or there's got to be a shortcut. And the reality is there isn't one. You have to invest the time and then you build this thing over time. And so that's why the network exists, because there's going to be a group of people that want to get better, and this is going to allow them to do so, but they need to understand that this is a process.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback off that a little bit. There are people that look at this and they go, well, I don't understand this to the level of someone like Bill, so I can't use it. And that's not what they need to understand. Is that what they were already doing. They have the sort of beginner's mindset where they know that there's a gap in what they're able to do and they want to get better. Okay.
Right.
And they want to they're trying to achieve this level of mastery of this thing because everyone is used to this like instant gratification and they want to like be able to pay for a course, be an expert immediately. That's not really how it works. But what I think people need to understand is that what they were already doing was creating some level of success. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be in this profession. So it doesn't really change what you're doing. It just sort of hones it. It makes it more beneficial and efficient for people. And it gets you to the positives quicker, actually, because you understand the rules better. You understand the constraints better. You understand the choices. And that's kind of like what we're talking about today, is like starting conditions and recognition of strategies. Knowing the primary and fundamental things of the model will allow you to see those patterns right away. So let's talk a bit about that. Let's talk about the starting conditions and the recognition of strategies as like one subject.
Well, so your physical structure lends itself to certain tendencies. And so if we can understand those, so we can give the same exercise to two people with different structures. But our expectation and execution, our expectation and outcome probably shouldn't be the same. Because I have two different structures that will behave differently because of their tendencies. We just pick a squat, and everybody and their sister by now, if they've been exposed to anything, would recognize that not everybody squats the same. nor should everybody squat the same, because you have tendencies associated with structure. Some people are going to have to take a different type of stance. Some people are going to be able to squat deeper than other people. Some people are going to be able to squat with load. Some people have to position, like if you're doing a barbell squat, you're going to position the barbell to be able to access certain spaces. And again, people are going to respond differently. Some people are going to gain muscle mass faster than other people. Some people will be able to produce force better than other people. But we want to understand those things, so we're not doing this blind, and so we can make better. We identify a structure. We say, okay, so your tendency is this. Doesn't mean I can't train hard. Doesn't mean I can't load the bar. Doesn't mean you're not going to get stronger, faster, bigger, or jump higher. It just means like, okay, my observed behaviors and the outcomes are going to lead me into the best strategy to apply in this circumstance. We need to get better with our exercise selection versus saying, well, everybody's the same, therefore, right? Because there are similarities without them. But as far as sameness goes, why do some people progress better than others? And again, some of these tendencies that we can identify will lead us in a direction that help us make better decisions, because that's what we're talking about with exercise selection. It's like, is there a better decision that I can make in regards to the exercise that I choose?
Yeah. So since this is the reconsider, like the thing we're trying to get people to reconsider. So what we should try to do is maybe present what a traditional model of thinking would be for like exercise selection versus what we're offering. So it's like what you're saying, giving everyone, regardless of age, structure, any of these things, these exercise categories that, were popularized by various individuals, like push and pull, knee dominant, hip dominant, that type of stuff, unilateral, bilateral. So you're getting pushing and pulling in the vertical and horizontal direction that this is pretty common framework that people would use for exercise selection. They're doing like some type of lower body work that's split into like hip dominant or knee dominant or hinging or squatting variations. And then they just use those as the things that everyone needs to do. And within that, they choose. Sometimes they'll choose exercises that seem to be friendlier to joints versus not, and based on age or injury history or stuff like that. But a lot of times you just see like pushing exercises, like what's the best pushing exercise? Everyone gets some type of bench press, everyone gets some type of row, everyone gets some type of pull down, and then everyone gets some type of overhead press. And that's across the board for a lot of people. So there's like, and people listening to this might have heard us enough to be like, well, that's silly. I would never do that. But you got to remember that, like, where did you come from? You were probably used to do that. Like I used to do stuff like that for sure. Everyone got.
It's just where you are. It's just where you are in your learning process.
And what we're trying to, we're trying to not necessarily just cater to the people that have already started to think the way that you and I might think, but also to like the people who are being introduced to this stuff. So that's why we have to kind of like dial back the way that we're presenting it a little bit.
Here's the thing. When we get back to assessment and determining starting conditions.
Yeah.
So if we can make the assumption that not everybody's going to be in the same starting conditions, but we apply the same program, and then if we do have a failure or we do have an incident where somebody goes, that really doesn't feel good on my shoulder or my knee, it's like we want to have an answer for that. And
right.
Again, that's part of the understanding that is something that you gain, through investigation, investing the time and understanding more about what the possibilities are. Because I don't think that they're as expressed as well as they could be. There's a lot of information that hasn't been digested and applied effectively. And so much information is through parroting and copycats.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at, and again, 71% of all statistics are made up, so take this with a grain of salt. But they would say 80% of blog writers or content creators are content consumers. So they're consuming a piece of content. They go, well, I don't have a piece of content. I'll just do the same thing that they did. And then they repeat it. And then it gets repeated and repeated and repeated. And then you have an availability bias where you put a kettlebell swing instruction into Dr. Google, and you're going to get millions of representations of that.
Right.
Like somebody was the first one, and then the next three guys looked at that and they go, "Well, I'll do that too. That'll be Tuesdays." Tuesday's content or whatever it might be. But that's how the information has been proliferated. And then there's been no questioning because don't have the requisite knowledge and understanding to even ask a question of it. That's been part of the problem. Is like, I don't have this level of questioning capability. I don't have the additional level of capability to even say, but why? Right. And then come up with some sort of defense. It's like, that doesn't seem right, or that does seem right. Why wouldn't it be? And that's that's the solution that we're trying to provide, right? Is let's deepen our understanding of those things. Let's understand what those actual capabilities are on a much deeper level before we even use the first exercise. And then we be coherent?
I think that's
based on those
one
decisions.
Of the biggest thing is like that level of coherence. The way that it's, from my experience, and probably the experience of a lot of people listening, is if anyone's worked in like a larger gym environment, there's usually like the training side and then the physical therapy side or chiropractic side or whatever you have within the same building. There's a lot of models that work like that. And a lot of those places sadly fall into this sort of hamster wheel of like trainers break them, therapists fix them, back and forth. Well, you can sort of eliminate that by just knowing the starting conditions a little bit better. If you understand that, then maybe you wouldn't be giving your Y person with a shoulder injury history an overhead press, because that space doesn't, knowing what you know about their starting conditions or the tendencies that a wide seems to have, so probabilistic thinking, you wouldn't give them anything where they press directly overhead, because that would not necessarily hurt them, but you run a higher risk, probability speaking, of coming into some type of impingement or failure, because that space doesn't really exist without some level of compensation.
Okay, keyword, yes. You're driving them into compensatory strategies. And if you don't know what those compensatory strategies are, and they don't offer a complaint, then your assumption is like, okay, we're free and clear.
Good
and then you continue to make that same decision based on that piece of information. And then later on, something negative does occur as a consequence of that. You have no viable solution.
Right. So you said, this is the example I'm talking about. So if I continue that example, it's like I take that person. In my model of thinking, what I was taught, I know that, okay, well, I have to balance pushing and pulling in all of these directions. So we have to have a vertical push. So we're going to do like, their shoulders bother them when we try to use the barbell, so we're going to use dumbbells. But then 6 months goes by, dumbbell pressing doesn't feel great, but they get through it. And then eventually their neck starts to bother them. They can't put their jacket on anymore. So then I kick them to the physical therapist. The PT checks ranges of motion, determines what they can do, which is what you should have sort of known in the beginning based on the starting conditions. And then they say, okay, well, don't horizontal press them anymore. They're going to do like a landmine press or like some type of like push-up variation that's more suitable for what was being injured. It's like we're kind of like we're able to offer a way to avoid that entire work. Like you avoid the injury cycle completely, and then you're actually able to keep things more beneficial and efficient for that person in the long run.
And let's be very clear that we're not trying to turn fitness and strength conditioning professionals into rehab professionals. What we're talking about is the ability to understand how the system behaves more effectively and increase level of communication. So let me give you an example that happened today. So I went in to work with one of our basketball players who is coming off of a surgical intervention. So he's in return to play mode, but he's still got some stuff. And so I go in and I work with him, and then he has to go out and he has to go through his return to play program with Mike Robertson. And the cool thing, and Mike and I have been working together since 2008. Actually, it's before then, but technically with IFAST, it's 2008. All I have to do is go out and say, he needs to, I tell Mike what not to do. In most cases, like just avoid this, and avoid this, and then make sure you encourage this enough. And then I can walk away. Because when we communicate, it's like he has that level of understanding. He knows that he's not the guy that goes into the purple room and makes those decisions, but he understands, like, we're speaking the same way. And it's just different measures of application. That's all it becomes. So in context, we follow the same rules, but we have to understand what the rules are. And those are the foundational principles that we talk about incessantly when we talk about the UHPC.
Yeah, so I'm not by any means saying, I'm not trying to like say that trainers should try to do physical therapy. But
Yeah.
if you go into this process trying to avoid the negative secondary consequences like injury, and you have markers of potential future injury being like past
Right.
injury history,
Right.
you can make the proper selections based on the starting conditions and the information so that you can avoid the possibility of them having to go back to physical therapy. Not that you are going to do it yourself.
Well, this leads into the recognition of key performance indicators and then the iterative elements of the programming when we're talking about exercise selection.
Yeah, so let's talk about that then.
Well, okay. So when we talk about key performance indicators, so these are movement capabilities that we monitor for change. So these might be something that would be a little bit more significant. So it's to say that we're talking about a baseball player, so we're going to talk about shoulder range of motion, or we're talking about a basketball player, so we're going to talk about knee orientations and the ability to access a certain degree of knee bend in certain surfaces. Right. So these are the key performance indicators. So these are the things that we monitor over time to make sure that they stay within a specific range. And then this allows us to stay agile, if you will, in our programming, because if we start to see somebody drift too quickly in one direction, then we can arrest that because our iterative process has the embedded tests in it. Like the exercises themselves can be the tests, or we can actually do formal tests on a period basis. We might do like a force plate every 2 weeks or something like that to make sure that the trend is the direction that we want to go. Or we'll do direct measurements to make sure that we don't have a range of motion that's dropping off precipitously or going in the exact wrong direction. And again, we can make these adjustments in programming before the adaptation is too great that we can't recover, or we lose a tremendous amount of time in that recovery. And so again, this is one of those things that you just build into the programming. But it then goes back to the beginning of this, where you say, I have to have a representative model that says that when I start to lose this movement, then this is actually what's happening.
Yeah, so the long and short of it is, if you're running into certain struggles with your clinical work or your strength and conditioning, personal training stuff, that there's these scenarios where you're doing everything that you think is supposed to be done, but it just doesn't make sense to you, or you keep running into like this one thing that doesn't seem coherent with this other model and framework that you've always used, then that's an indication that you need to kind of explore other types of models, like something that, like, the word like that I think about, other than just saying coherent over and over again, is someone had mentioned like this model is the most complete version of a model that they've found. I think it's just because it has the answer. Any good model should be able to answer all of the questions within that realm and not have to create a bunch of exceptions to rules, because the rules always will remain the rules. It's when you're using a certain model or framework that has to create all of these like subcategories and then sub courses to sort of explain, like, oh, well, this person is this, but with this modifier. And so we need to create like a course about this one modifier. It's like, well, maybe the original principle that you're trying to convey isn't really a truth. Like, it isn't really one of the principles.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and if I can pump up the decision-making course, that concept right there is actually covered in the decision-making course as to how and why that thing arises and then what to do about it. So
yeah,
it's
we should pump up that course.
We should.
Because I think people open it up expecting to see like an if-then sort of sheet of what to do with a treatment scenario or clinical scenario or a personal training client. And then they see this like course on how to think.
Yes.
And they're like, this isn't about the model, but it's so important that you have this.
It is.
It's like, if you want, like, I would even challenge anyone that's taken the 101 course, take the decision-making course and then take the 101 course again. Like, you'll see it differently. This information, you'll be able to process it much differently if you actually have a model and framework for decision-making. Plus, it's like, there's going to be a struggle involved with this, but you can take any scenario that you're currently dealing with and run it through that decision-making process.
Right.
Like think about inversion, think about the deductive and inductive reasoning aspects of what problem you're trying to solve. Like that's what we're trying to create, is like, if we can help create a human being who's like a nice person, has communication and emotional intelligence skills, and has this sort of framework in which to problem solve, including decision making skills, and then more specifically what to do with what we're talking about, the starting conditions, the recognition of patterns and strategies, awareness of secondary consequences, and then you iterate and you practice. That's it. Should we just end the episode?
That is it.
That's it, everybody.
Simple. It's so simple, Chris.
And then there's gonna be the trolls that watch our podcast that are gonna say that we didn't answer anything in the last 30 minutes. But yeah.
But we did.
Right.
We did. It's like, but again, this is a 10,000 foot perspective. It's like these are the things that you want to have in play as you're moving forward, right? We can talk about specifics of archetypes. We can talk about their behaviors. We can talk about center of gravity. We can talk about muscle activity and joint positions and things like that. But if you don't have, again, we always go back to frameworks. Like the model is a framework of how the system behaves and how you make a decision. You have to have both, because if you have understanding but you don't know what to do next because you don't have a process of making a decision, then you're still lost.
Right. Yeah. So it's another point that I want to make: people that are hesitant to try to use this stuff because they don't think that they understand it. If you can start to understand the basic principles and the archetypes and the behaviors that we would associate with those archetypes, then all you need to do is whoever you're working with, start to try to implement this stuff using what would be referred to as like safe to fail experiments. So don't create a scenario for someone with a frozen shoulder where you're going to try to have them press overhead because maybe they're okay because they're a narrow. Like, don't do that. That's not a safe to fail experiment. It's like maybe that person that keeps having a tricky frozen shoulder needs to go see the PT. Then you can find out their ranges of motion that they have on the table, figure out where their structure is in space, and then try to reverse engineer where they've ended up with their center of gravity. And that will be what dictates what you do. So you're unloading them with different cable chopping and pressing variations, for instance. And then you're progressing them to things where maybe they're holding a position with a landmine press instead of actually doing the motion. And they're just breathing in that position, because it could be as effective as anything else. Just start getting into the starting position and breathing. And then after that, like doing the press. This is just an example, just because people don't like it when we don't give examples of things.
There are plenty of examples that will be on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the answer is, like, for anyone listening to this, it's like, okay, this is all great conceptually, but like, what do I do with it? Where do I like find the specifics? If you haven't joined the UHP network, like, do that right now, because that will allow you to, if you haven't taken the 101 course, which is free, you can do that. You'll get all of the foundational elements that are written out in categories that we determined were the best way to learn all of this stuff in order. Programming and exercise selection being one of the latter modules, because it helps you sort of implement and integrate all of the things that you've learned foundationally up to that point. And then once you're there, once you get through that, there's a space that you can communicate with other people that have taken the course and sort of talk about your struggles and your safe to fail experiments that maybe failed, but that's okay. Like, you're going to have to do that. This last part of the investment of experience, like, no one is going to be good at this right away. And it's going to be hard, and you're going to question whether or not you want to keep using it, because what you used to do was fine. Maybe you don't want to be complacent, but also, like, you don't want to be put up against this sort of struggling scenario all the time. So you kind of back off a little bit, but that's really up to you. And, like, do you want to be better? Do you want to be able to, like, you want to be able to problem solve in the quickest possible way for each person that you're trying to help, and you might need to change the model that you're using, the framework that you're using. Cool. Well, I'm done. You got anything else you want to say?
Absolutely not. What are we gonna leave the 6 people that are remaining? We have to
The
formulate
longs.
we have to
I don't know.
formulate
I think we got a lot of fans that stay all the way. Well, I keep telling people on the network things that'll help us in terms of like the algorithm, and watching the video all the way through is helpful. So hopefully everyone's listening to us and they are watching the video all the way through. If you're a fan and you want to see this get out to more people, like, subscribe, share it with people that you think would help, and then leave comments, even if it's just like, hey, this is a great episode. Just leave comments.
Well, that would be great if they would all leave that as their comment. Hey, this is a great episode.
Yeah.
Because I'm tired of doing it all myself. To be honest with you, it's like, like all of the pseudonyms. Is it pseudonym? What's the word?
I don't know. You mean like all the alternate accounts that you've made to try to like fake it? All of we have all the paid bots that we have come in and leave comments. That's the big issue with YouTube, is all the bots.
Oh, is it?
Bill doesn't even know what that is.
I barely have my own account.
Bill is picturing a robot sitting at a keyboard typing like Terminator or something.
I barely have my own account.
Hey, I don't know if I'll keep this. I don't know if no one's watching anymore, so let's talk about this. Did you see that the Cape Crusader TV show, the anime TV show that's going to be Golden Age Batman?
I did.
I'm kind of excited for that.
Isn't it the guy that did the animated series? That's the comeback, right?
I believe so.
Are they going to get Mark Hamill? Is it Mark Hamill?
Mark said that he would not do the Joker anymore without Kevin. So I don't know. I would say no. Mark has said in several interviews that they would ask him. They'd be like, "Will you do the Joker for this?" And he said, "Is Kevin doing it?" And if Kevin said yes, he was in every time. That was always how it worked. He's never done it with. I don't think he's ever done it. I shouldn't say never, but I don't think he's ever done it without. We'll never have Mark Hamill as Joker again, I don't think.
How can they? Surely they could AI Kevin Conroy, right?
I don't think Mark doesn't seem like he's into that.
No.
Luke Skywalker doesn't play that.
Luke Skywalker doesn't like the technology.
It's so amazing to watch Star Wars, like A New Hope, and then be like, that's the Joker. Because he is, I mean, Mark Hamill is my Joker, for sure. I think he's a Joker for a lot of people. Anyone that grew up around when the animated series is out, he is the perfect Joker. And then I think, Heath Ledger did an amazing job, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, other than like Jared Leto, which he's just trying too hard, I think most of the Jokers have been great.
I thought his Joker in the Justice League, like the Zack Snyder version of the Justice League, was good. I liked it. Actually,
yeah.
I don't know. I like that part because it was a small part. It wasn't. Yeah. He wasn't driving the show, right? He got to be a little weird, know, right. And he got the dig. He got the dig for the killing Robin thing. So
yeah, the whole Jason Todd thing. Yeah. What was I going to say? Something about Batman and Joker. If they ever do like the bonus scene from the Batman where Barry Keoghan is doing Joker, I think he'll be good. That's like a psychopath version of Joker, which we haven't really the really crazy Texas Chainsaw Massacre style version of the Joker.
Yes.
Cool.
Indeed.
All right. Well, there's your Batman material.
Yeah. Excellent.
I'm just going to stop recording. Nice.